People come into town and they bring different colors, different approaches, and it expands and
Keith Urban stepped onto the stage in Chicago on September 25, 2025, expecting to do what he had done thousands of times before. Lose himself in the music and help the crowd do the same. But something felt different that night. When he reached the chorus of The Fighter, a song long associated with love, reassurance, and partnership, he altered a single word. To most people, it sounded small. To those watching closely, it felt seismic. 5 days later, divorce papers were filed, ending a marriage that had lasted nearly 19 years. The moment didn't create the story. It revealed one that had been quietly unfolding for a long time, behind tours, albums, recovery milestones, and the public image of resilience that had followed Urban for decades. Early success and early consequences. By his late teens, Keith Urban was no longer just a promising talent. He was becoming a recognizable name in Australian country music. Winning the Toyota Star Maker competition brought industry attention and opened doors that had once seemed unreachable. With opportunity came pressure. Expectations grew quickly, and touring schedules became intense. Night after night, the demand to perform flawlessly began to shape how Keith related to himself and his work. When mistakes happened, they weren't private. Setbacks became visible, and there was little room to process them openly. The industry rewarded momentum, not reflection. These early experiences taught him discipline and professionalism, but they also planted seeds of vulnerability. He learned how to push forward even when things felt unstable beneath the surface. While success validated his path, it didn't provide emotional protection. The contrast between achievement and inner strain would become a recurring theme, one that followed him long after the applause faded. Roots. In a quiet place. Keith Lionel Urban was born on October 26, 1967 in Whangarei, New Zealand, into a family that believed deeply in effort, sacrifice, and persistence. His father, Bob Urban, ran a modest fabric shop, while his mother, Marianne, carried a strong European heritage shaped by resilience rather than comfort. Music existed in his family history, but not as a path to recognition, more as a means of expression and survival. When Keith was just 2 years old, the family relocated to Caboolture, Queensland, a small town far removed from major cities and cultural centers. There was no thriving music scene, no country radio stations, and no clear examples of how a child from such a place could dream big. What Caboolture offered instead was quiet, long stretches of time, open roads, and the freedom to imagine. In that stillness, Keith didn't inherit a future, he had to create one. The absence of opportunity became the very space where focus, patience, and discipline quietly took root. The guitar that changed everything. In 1971, during long, exhausting drives across Australia's vast landscape, Bob Urban bought his young son a simple ukulele, hoping it would keep him occupied. It was never meant to spark anything lasting. But 2 years later, that casual decision evolved into something far more serious when Bob purchased a second-hand Yamaha guitar for $50. Almost immediately, Keith connected with the instrument in a way that surprised everyone around him. He practiced relentlessly, sometimes for 6 to 8 hours a day, wearing down strings and building calluses that hardened his fingertips. Music became more than a pastime. It became a place of safety and control. His parents saw the commitment early, even when it meant cutting household expenses and working extra hours to afford lessons and travel. By the time Keith turned 10, he had memorized hundreds of songs and was performing regularly. It wasn't about applause or attention. Playing felt essential, like breathing. And once that connection formed, there was no turning back. Growing up too fast, Keith Urban's childhood unfolded far from traditional routines. Instead of classrooms and schoolyards, his world was shaped by stages, festival grounds, and long drives between performances. His parents traveled tens of thousands of kilometers to support his growing career, often sleeping in their car to make it financially possible. School became inconsistent, and eventually, music took priority. By his early teens, Keith was performing in adult venues, learning how to command attention in noisy, unpredictable environments. He gained confidence quickly, but that confidence came with a cost. While his peers were discovering adolescence at a natural pace, Keith was navigating professional expectations and adult spaces far too early. The experience sharpened his instincts and discipline, but it also created distance. Music gave him identity and purpose, yet it separated him from the normal rhythms of childhood. Success arrived early, but stability did not. Those years shaped his resilience, while quietly teaching him that talent alone could never guarantee balance. Starting over in Nashville. In the early 1990s, Keith Urban made a bold decision to leave Australia and start over in Nashville, the heart of country music. He arrived with limited money and no guarantees, only the belief that persistence could eventually open doors. Nashville didn't offer instant validation. Instead, it tested him with rejection, uncertainty, and long stretches of invisibility. He slept on friends' couches, worked as a session guitarist, and played open mic nights just to stay connected to the scene. Progress was slow and often discouraging. There was no defining breakthrough moment, only gradual movement forward. During this time, Keith learned how to listen closely, adapt his sound, and respect the craft beyond performance alone. Nashville taught him patience, humility, and endurance. It reshaped his understanding of success, proving that talent mattered, but resilience mattered more. Those quiet, difficult years laid the foundation for everything that would come next. The cost of pressure. When Keith Urban finally broke through in the late 1990s and early 2000s, success arrived with overwhelming force. Albums climbed the charts, singles dominated radio, and his name quickly became central to modern country music. But momentum came at a price. The cycle of touring, recording, promotion, and constant visibility left little room to pause or recover. Expectations were relentless, and the pressure to maintain perfection followed him everywhere. Urban later spoke openly about how, during this period, he struggled with addiction, not as a symbol of excess, but as a way to cope. The same discipline and intensity that fueled his rise also left him vulnerable when the pace became unsustainable. Success magnified everything: the joy of achievement, the exhaustion of repetition, and the emotional cracks forming beneath the surface. From the outside, it looked like triumph. Inside, it felt like survival. Those years marked a turning point, forcing him to confront the reality that ambition alone could not protect him from burnout or inner conflict, love, fame, and fragility. In 2005, Keith Urban met Nicole Kidman, and their connection felt immediate and steadying. They married the following year, and for a brief moment, life seemed to align, personal happiness meeting professional success. But early in their marriage, Urban faced one of the most difficult chapters of his life. With Kidman's support, he entered rehabilitation, confronting patterns that had followed him for years. He later described that intervention not as judgment or failure, but as an act of care and courage. Recovery became a daily practice rather than a one-time decision. It required honesty, accountability, and patience. For a long time, it worked. Their relationship became a source of grounding, offering structure during a period of vulnerability. Yet, even with love and commitment, recovery was never simple. Fame magnified stress, and balance required constant effort. Their story during these years reflected something deeply human: how love can support healing, but cannot replace the work required to sustain it. Music as survival. Throughout the next decade, Keith Urban's music reflected both evolution and unease. Each album revealed an artist unwilling to stand still, experimenting with sound, production, and collaboration. Some listeners embraced the changes, while others struggled with them. But for Urban, music was never just about commercial success. It was his language for processing emotion, identity, and pressure. Songs about reassurance, distance, resilience, and perseverance weren't abstract ideas. They mirrored a life spent moving between stages, cities, and responsibilities. Writing and performing became a form of regulation, a way to make sense of feelings that couldn't always be spoken aloud. Even when critics questioned his direction, Urban continued forward, guided by instinct rather than comfort. Music offered continuity when everything else felt in motion. It grounded him during periods of uncertainty and gave structure to chaos. More than a career, it became a lifeline. Proof that expression could hold what words alone could not. Living parallel. Lives. As Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman's careers expanded globally, time became their rarest resource. International tours, film schedules, and long-term projects kept them moving in different directions, often for months at a time. These separations weren't dramatic or sudden. They were gradual and quiet. Distance became routine. Friends later shared that by the late 2000s, the couple often lived in different cities, working hard to stay connected despite demanding schedules. There was no single moment when things fell apart. Instead, it was a slow drift, shaped by logistics, exhaustion, and competing responsibilities. They continued showing up for their family, balancing careers while trying to preserve closeness. But parallel lives, even when well-intentioned, can slowly widen the space between people. Their story during this period reflects a reality many couples face: how love can remain present even as proximity fades, and how commitment sometimes struggles against the practical weight of time and distance. Reinvention in a changing industry. Keith Urban's willingness to evolve kept him relevant in an industry that was changing faster than ever. As country music expanded and blended with pop, rock, and electronic influences, Urban leaned into experimentation. Collaborations beyond traditional boundaries introduced his music to new audiences, while also drawing criticism from longtime fans. Each reinvention carried risk. Not every project resonated the way he hoped, and some releases received mixed reactions. Still, Urban continued forward, motivated by curiosity rather than nostalgia. He wasn't interested in repeating past formulas simply because they worked. Even when commercial performance fluctuated, his commitment to growth remained intact. Reinvention for him wasn't about chasing trends. It was about staying truthful to where he was creatively and emotionally. In an industry that often rewards familiarity, Urban chose movement. That choice kept his work unpredictable, sometimes polarizing, but consistently honest. The weight of quiet struggles. Behind the public performances and steady output, the emotional weight slowly accumulated. The pandemic years removed the structures Keith Urban had relied on for balance. Touring schedules, rehearsals, and the shared energy of live audiences. Like many artists, he suddenly found himself isolated, facing long stretches of stillness that offered little distraction from internal pressure. Without movement, unresolved feelings surfaced. Urban turned inward, trying to remain strong for others while quietly navigating uncertainty himself. Music once again became both refuge and reflection. Writing and recording from home allowed him to stay connected to his craft, even as the world stood still. The songs from this period carried softer edges, touching on endurance, loneliness, and the search for steadiness in unstable times. It wasn't collapse, but it wasn't ease either. These were quiet struggles, largely invisible, deeply personal, and difficult to articulate, yet they shaped him reinforcing the truth that strength isn't always loud, and resilience often unfolds far from the spotlight. The night everything felt different. When the High and Alive tour launched in September 2025, Keith Urban stepped on stage with familiar confidence. The shows were tight, the crowds enthusiastic, and the energy unmistakable. Still, longtime fans sensed a subtle shift. There was a different emotional weight in the delivery, a restraint that hadn't always been there before. Changes in set lists and tone hinted at something unresolved beneath the surface. The Chicago performance stood out, not because of spectacle, but because it felt personal. Urban has always used music to communicate what words struggle to carry, and that night, the connection felt especially raw. It wasn't dramatic or confrontational, it was human. The songs lingered longer, the pauses felt heavier, and the performance carried an intimacy that reached beyond entertainment. Nothing was announced, nothing explained, but the atmosphere suggested transition. It wasn't the start of a story, it was a moment where everything already in motion quietly surfaced through sound. An ending without villains. When news of the divorce became public days later, it arrived without accusation or spectacle. There were no dramatic statements, only a shared acknowledgement of irreconcilable differences and a continued commitment to their children. Nearly 2 decades of marriage don't dissolve in an instant. They evolve through years of compromise, distance, effort, and care. Sometimes, despite intention and history, continuing forward together becomes more painful than stepping apart. For Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, the ending wasn't framed as defeat. It was recognition. Recognition that love can exist alongside change, and that letting go doesn't erase what came before. Their story reflects a reality many understand, but few discuss openly. That endings don't always come from conflict. Sometimes they come from exhaustion, growth in different directions, or the quiet realization that something once strong has shifted beyond repair. There were no villains here, only 2 people acknowledging the truth of where they stood. Still standing, Keith Urban continues to tour, write, and perform. Not because everything is resolved, but because music remains his anchor. It has always been the place where he finds clarity when life feels uncertain. He speaks openly about sobriety, personal growth, and the importance of being present for his daughters, grounding himself in responsibility and routine. His story isn't defined by perfection or collapse. It's shaped by persistence, by choosing to keep moving forward even when answers aren't immediate. The stage, once a place of escape, has become a place of balance. Each performance reflects experience rather than bravado. Urban understands now that strength doesn't come from denying struggle, but from acknowledging it without surrender. His journey reminds us that success doesn't protect anyone from difficulty, and that resilience often requires repetition, showing up again and again even when the path feels unclear. The music continues, not as distraction, but as continuity. The man behind the music. At its core, Keith Urban's journey isn't about awards, charts, or headlines. It's about a boy from a quiet town who found meaning in sound and carried it across continents. Along the way, he learned, sometimes painfully, that talent alone doesn't replace healing, and ambition doesn't erase vulnerability. His career reflects evolution, not certainty. Each chapter adds depth rather than closure. Urban's legacy isn't defined by a single song, relationship, or era. It's shaped by the willingness to keep showing up honestly, even when life feels unresolved. The applause fades, the music remains. What endures most is the humanity behind the craft, the discipline, the doubt, the recovery, and the courage to continue. In that sense, his story mirrors many lives lived quietly beyond the spotlight, imperfect, adaptive, and real. Long after the lights dim, what lingers is not just the sound, but the sincerity with which it was made.